Welcome to the Retrospect podcast, a show where people come together from different walks of life and discuss a topic from their generation's perspective. My name is Ian, and as always, I'm joined by Jason.
Hello, everyone.
And Stoney.
Hello.
And if I'm not mistaken, this episode has been a long time in the making.
Yes, we've been talking about doing this one for a long time.
You got a guest here, so
Finally got it.
I'll go ahead and let you introduce our
Miss Shanna.
guest.
Hello.
So I found this book a while back called The History of Death. And one of the things that I love about Miranda is I think we have a 5,000 book library together.
Okay,
So
there you go.
I found this book and we're looking at it. She goes, "Oh, you know, the neighbor across the street is a mortician. She would be great on your show." And then come to find out she has an online presence.
Correct.
and it's
Talk like a
called
mortician.
Talk Like a Mortician. And I kept saying, what did I say it was? Ask the mortician, but it's Talk Like a Mortician. And so we finally got you on.
Thank
Welcome
you.
to the show,
Thank you.
Shanna.
I'm
So-
happy to be here.
I have a question
Okay.
right off the bat.
Okay.
It seems to me that the mortician field is very male dominated.
Yes.
How did you get into this field?
So exactly like you said, we see in growing up, I imagined a funeral director or mortician was always a tall man with hunched over shoulders.
Lurch.
Yes,
Yeah,
lurch.
I'm thinking from the guy from Phantasm.
Yes, Gomez,
Yeah.
with a big oversized coat, kind of sunken dark eyes
Little
and stuff.
wistful mustache.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I always expected. And my stepdad passed away very unexpectedly, and we had to go to the funeral home.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not want to go because I was expecting that creepy man. And when we walked in, there was a young lady. She was about 21, 22 years old. Her name was Rachel. And when my mom walked in, of course, because it was so tragic, it wasn't expected. My mom barely could get through the front door without crying. And Rachel grabbed her and just held her and hugged her. And she had no idea. She'd never met her before. So then we did the whole entire arrangements, everything. And she had such a compassion. But the kicker was when we went to the visitation. So visitation, we call it visitation, the funeral walk. A lot of people call it a wake.
Awake. Okay.
So at the visitation, during that family hour, my mom was up at the front with my stepdad at his casket, and she was just crying, and I was trying to get to her. And when I finally got to the casket, my mom was leaned over into the casket, into his chest, and there was somebody else leaned over into his chest as well. And they were both just sobbing, completely sobbing. And so I'm like trying to console two people and trying to figure out who this other person was. And when she stood up, it was my funeral director.
Oh, wow.
And she had mascara running down her face. She had got mascara on his white dress shirt. And at that point, I saw something completely different. I saw that it wasn't, for her, it wasn't a job. She had true emotions. She could feel my mom's emotions. And that changed my whole entire look on the industry. And I knew that I was an accountant before. And so I went back to school. Matter of fact, I asked Rachel for a job. I was like, I would love to make coffee, greet the old ladies that walk in the building and show them where to go. I said, I do not want to touch a body. I don't want to be around any of that. But I would love to have that connection that I saw Rachel have with families. So my hire date was September 10th. September 11th, my grandmother passed away. And my grandmother had all of her prearrangements done with that same funeral home.
Oh, my gosh.
And so Rachel came to pick my grandmother up, and she was like, I know you don't want to be a part of any of it, but what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to be part of everything. And from that moment on,
Wow.
that was it.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went back to school. I did my internship.
How long is like the schooling and stuff for that?
The schooling for that is going to be usually about a year to 18 months.
Oh, wow, that's not
There's
bad.
no, it's not. There's only one school in Louisiana. There's a couple in Texas. So it's not something that you can just,
Of course, right.
Anywhere you can go. You have to go to an accredited mortuary college.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, what a interesting and such a such a crazy story. But at the
Yeah.
same time, like what? But it's so specific to you, and like that's
Right.
such a, like you said, that like you don't want to be involved at all until like it was right
Until
in
it
front
was
of you.
Yes,
That's
and then
so-
I want
yeah.
it to be.
Wow.
And I try to, especially if we have younger kids, teenagers that come to a funeral, and you see them looking around, because everybody is. We're all very curious.
Right.
That doesn't mean it's a
course.
bad thing. And so I try to talk to those young people. If I have a young little boy that wants to stand by his dad who's a pallbearer and help push the casket out, I'm going to pull him by me and let him help as much as possible, because the death world, everybody thinks that it's very scary and stuff. And I want to try to help people realize
Right.
that it's not.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's so cool though.
Well, Stoney, you were talking about it being male dominated. I mean, I'm looking at the latest, some stats I've pulled up here. It's 61% are male,
Wow.
38% are female. Is that, Jen, is that about right? I mean, I don't know how up to date that is, but is
So
that
right
seem
now,
to be about?
right now, the for Mortuary College, it's about a 54% female.
Really?
rate
Now,
that
I
is going
did
to
notice the number of females going into this
Yes.
profession has been steadily rising since 2010.
Yes,
had a-
absolutely.
I had a friend of mine, I believe she moved off somewhere else now, but she, I think, was I think she did the whole, I don't think she went through the whole like mortician stuff, but I believe that she worked at a funeral home and did a lot of the stuff just beneath all of that.
There's so
And
much
so-
to do.
And that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So
Yeah.
but again, the crazy thing about that was, of all the people that I would have like pinned as to do that kind of profession, she was not the one, but she loved it, and she was just, I think she did a great job at it.
So I do a lot
yeah.
of career days at
Yeah,
high
yeah.
schools and stuff.
Oh,
and
wow.
I usually pull up my first slide is usually Gomez or Lurch or something up there, and I'm like, this is what you expect a funeral director to look
course.
at. And then I'm like, but then you have me,
Right,
and
right.
it's totally different.
expectation, reality.
Right, right.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely the unemployment rate for a mortician has about 1.9%. So it's pretty much a
There's definitely a high demand.
well, there's death is always here. So it's
Well, what's the thing? There's three professions to get into that you'll always have a job: food, plumbing, and funerals. You'll always have a job there.
Yeah.
So people got to eat, people
Yeah.
got to poop, and apparently we're all going to pass.
All gonna pass.
So you said there's like one school in Louisiana. There's a few in Texas. Now is this degree what would be the equivalent of a bachelor's degree?
No, usually it's an associate's in applied science or mortuary science.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because I'm right now educational attainment. 33% are associate, 31% bachelor's, and then high school diploma 25%, doctorate 3%. There actually people get doctorates in this stuff.
Not that I know of.
I mean, I don't know what you could do.
So
but-
I don't know if you said when that happened, but when did you like start the process of like going back to school for
Going
mortician?
back to school.
Yeah. Was that like
I had been employed probably about 3 months, and I was doing what we call removal. So when someone passes away,
right?
I was doing that in the middle of the night, and I realized this definitely is for me.
Right.
And so I went back to school. I worked at the local funeral home. I worked at the local coroner's office.
Wow.
So it was pretty fast after that
Okay.
when I decided to. It definitely was for me.
So how long have you been like an official like mortician? Like
I have been in the business for 15 years.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When you've been doing it for so long and you have your online presence, Talk Like a Mortician, do you study the history of this? Because I'm fascinated by that. Reading this book and other stuff, my research, it seems like the Civil War kind of changed funeral practices in America.
So around that time is when we started with embalming,
Right.
because they were trying to get the soldiers home to their family and to be in a presentable state for their family to be able to be seen.
Right.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of advances, I think, made during that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was
a variety of things.
4,000 soldiers alone by Dr. Thomas Holmes. Does that sound familiar?
Is he the father of embalming?
He's the father of embalming,
Yes.
right? So during the Civil War, he did 4,000 just by himself.
And he did those outside on two scaffolds, in a wood box. Yeah.
So the question is the history of embalming. I mean, so we say this really started taking place during the Civil War, but I mean, prior to that, was there embalming?
Yes. So even back in Jesus' days, they considered when Mary and Martha went to the tomb.
Right.
Okay. They were bringing flowers and things like that
to
mask the smell. And that's what they also considered was part of that process of embalming.
But embalming's been going on since the Egyptians.
Absolutely.
Because they had tools, and because they believed when they were in their coffin or whatever they were in, all of their organs were in jars next to them to go with them. They had a little hook that they would stick up their nose
and take the brain
out. And then that went in one jar. And then the other, because they needed them.
That's right.
So embalming's been going on a long time now.
It's
the
just
formaldehyde injections probably from the Civil War times and stuff.
Right.
So the idea of using formaldehyde, I mean, how did that come about? I mean,
well, your formaldehyde is going to
It's a preservative.
Thank you.
It's
going to preserve. So that formaldehyde for the Civil War, again, we're trying to preserve that soldier to at least get home. It's not a 100-year guarantee.
Oh, okay.
It's typically to preserve that body for the viewing and for the funeral service.
Oh, see, that I didn't know. I thought it was long term. But then when you look at some of the Egyptian mummies, what they did, they're still there.
They're still there. Yeah.
So that's fascinating to me. And then we changed it, and now
the climate over there, that dry.
The dry, and they used a lot of salt and stuff like that. So even with our bodies today, some can last forever. But then there's some dependent on the environment they're around, the chemicals that have been put in their body as far as medicine, that even though the embalming slows that process down, it's still going to continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
So it's mainly just to be able to view, for that family to have that closing time.
I started reading about Dr. Holmes a little bit, and his point was to make this method popular as practical and emotional way to semblance of the good death, even in war times. What I mean, did you study this? What was going through his head? How does he come to that point?
Possibly, and I do not know this for a fact, but
does that go in line with your story?
Yes, because, the soldiers usually died an awful death.
And mass graves.
Yes, and to get them back to their family, he's going to close their mouth. He's going to close their eyes. He's going to make them look peaceful, so Mama, when she gets her boy back,
has some closure. Yeah,
but didn't they do that
closure
before? It was the family, and you got buried on the family plot of land or something. But didn't they do that too during the wake period in the living room?
They did, but sometimes still they weren't really embalming,
right?
So decomposing was still happening. So they were going to they had to mask smells. They had to mask the discoloration of the skin and all that because they weren't embalmed.
Okay, wow.
So I'm curious, how did the transition occur with having funerals at homes to funeral homes? How did that kind of happen?
I think just the economy, because we still have families sometimes that will ask, can you bring them to our house?
Oh, really?
Well, they were undertakers before, and then the undertakers became the funeral directors when it became a more business-oriented, I guess. Because the undertakers made the coffin, brought that to the family, and took the little measurements, made the coffin by hand, and then said, okay, here you go, give me $1.
Right. So yes, we still do have families.
Really?
Occasionally, it's not it's not often. Sometimes in the smaller communities, they would like Grandma J to be brought home to the homestead and let people visit then.
So have you had, like, I don't know is the process kind of like, is the normal process what you kind of did, like just starting off in like a position and then kind of working your way up to going to school for it? Is there like some sort of like mentorship kind of program or something like that?
So there's some people who have grown up in the business where they might be family-owned business. So little boy has, lived above the funeral home, and that's all he knew. And at 12 years old, he was going out and doing removals, and he just always knew that was what it was going to be.
Yeah.
Some people in middle school realized that that's what they wanted to be. So it's kind of all the way around the board. I didn't want anything to do with it.
Of course, right,
Not at all.
I was curious because I mean, like you were saying, you have like workshop or like a what did you call it? Like days where you go out to like schools,
career days.
Career days, yeah. Where I was curious if that sort of thing, like,
and those are absolutely amazing because, especially middle school, high school kids, they're not afraid to ask.
100%.
Questions, and there's no silly or weird question. They come up with some,
of course,
almost off the wall ones, but they get so intrigued in it, and
that's cool.
And my job is to make them understand.
Right. So how long have you done those sort of things, like career days? Was that
probably about 12 years?
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Is that where Talk Like a Mortician came from?
All right.
No, Talk Like a Mortician came from. I had a couple of people just simply ask me little questions like, when do most people pass away? Is there a certain time of the year when most people pass away?
Interesting.
And so I was answering certain questions like that. And I was like, you know what? This is things that the public need to know. For that question, though, death isn't part of a calendar. You know, it's not. But when you have somebody, we have more deaths that happen around the holidays. Around somebody's birthday. We have so many times the person will pass on their birthday. I feel the reason that it is especially if they're on hospice or something, they want to make it to that next birthday. And when they make it to 93, they're okay. They're at peace. They want to go. Wow. They want to see one more New Year come in. They want to see one more Christmas. I know y'all have heard this. They waited until my son got there.
Right.
And then they're
the
okay.
Closure,
They have that. So I do feel like they get that closure exactly before they pass.
Wow. I had a good friend of mine back in the 80s. He was a stuntman, and his mom caught the sea, and he said, "I need help. I got to go do this movie." So I moved in to help him take care of her, and just got to know this lady just so wonderfully. Spent almost a year and a half there. Helping. He would come in and out with his movie stuff. I would go in and out with my protective services stuff. And she wound up in the hospital, and she was out. And we were there for almost 4 days straight. No showers, no nothing, hoping she'd wake up. And that fourth morning, she woke up, perfect, sat up. What are y'all doing? Where are we? And, we're talking to her, and she says, okay, look, what I need y'all to do is I want my favorite ice cream, and y'all need to go home and take a shower.
Yep.
Y'all need to go home and take a shower. And I says, hey, Ron, look, go get she said, no, both of y'all go together. Take a shower, please. Would y'all take a shower and brush your teeth and bring me back my favorite ice cream? And when we got back, she had passed. She woke up to give us that strength, and she just didn't want us to see her.
Right. And most of the time, and I am not a nurse, but most of the time, if they're on hospice or something like that, they are going to have a burst of energy before.
But she wasn't on hospice. She was just in. It was just time. She knew it was time.
Yeah. And a lot of times people do wait until they don't want their loved ones to be there. So some want their loved ones to be there, but some do not. And they wait until that person goes and takes a shower, and that's when they pass.
Right. I've heard the same sort of thing for like the mental stuff, the dementia, that kind of stuff, like having that last moment of like lucidity before like it all goes in a way, which is kind of crazy. But I
love the stories when people say that, grandma is looking up and is seeing her husband who passed and is talking, having a conversation.
Right.
Like, I do believe that that's the afterlife, I guess you want to say. I do believe that they see that and they're coming for them.
Yeah.
Well, we did a show a long time ago about angels and demons.
I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna mention a very personal experience that I had when my daddy died, because he died at the house.
Oh gosh.
And we had a little dog that was very, very close to my father. And my dad had cancer. He eventually died of a brain tumor. It actually metastasized as a brain tumor, and he died from that. But the morning he died was very early. It was like 5:30 in the morning. The little dog went inside the room and was fixated on the ceiling.
Oh,
Would not budge.
Oh, no.
Would not budge.
Uh-oh.
I mean, you can just imagine a dog sitting on its hind legs,
Right.
staring at the ceiling
Right.
for a good 5 minutes,
Yeah.
solid still. And then after that, he put his head down and walked out the room.
Dang.
and is that when he passed?
He died.
Wow.
Wow.
He had died. And so what the dog sensed, I would think it was the soul departing the body
Right.
and drifting up. I mean, most people that have near-death experiences, they, explain or, they try to tell people that I kind of saw my body looking
Right,
down
right.
on it.
Looking down.
So, yeah. So it was a very moving moment because I knew the night before I went to bed, hospice had already been taking care of him. His legs were going ice cold.
Oh, gosh.
At that point, the hospice, they kind of, they walk you through this whole process
Hospice people
of
are
death.
amazing.
And they said, okay, once the legs, that means the body's shutting down.
Wow.
And the next morning, my mom woke me up and said, your dad died. So
seeing the dog do all of that, did that give you any kind of closure?
well, believe it or not, I actually had another experience with him about a year before he died. That was probably even more dramatic than what I saw little Onyx. And that was our little dog's name. But I remember being woken up early, and it was like 2:00 in the morning. Heard my daddy talking. My daddy was, his hours of his, because of the brain issue, he would be up all hours of the night, and then he would sleep during the day or vice versa. But this particular, he was up, and I heard him talking. I was like, what is he saying in there? So, I was 19 years old when my dad died.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So, I mean, I was 18, so I'm a senior in high school or maybe a freshman in college. I don't quite remember. But I walk in the den, and he had his recliner that he sat on.
Yeah.
And then there was another recliner next to where my mom normally would sit. And it was rocking.
Oh,
And I said, Dad, are you okay? And he was just smiling. He goes, yeah, I'm fine. I said, was Mom in here? He said, no. I said, well, I walked in the room. My mom was in their bedroom sleeping.
Yeah.
When I tell you there was electricity in that room,
Oh yeah.
I mean, even today, that's been 30 years ago. I still feel it.
Wow.
But he told me at that point, he said, Jesus says I'm going to heaven.
Oh man.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have had some and then of course you follow that up with the dog
right.
Oh right. Right.
incident. And it's like, wow, so you as a kid, you're trying to process all this because Dad's illness was over the course of about 4 or 5 years.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah.
These things are they're personal. They're,
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the questions I wanted to get with you on, especially like from the shift from coffin to caskets. There was a huge shift in that, and there was a lot of people very resistant to that. And one of my questions was, how did the casket designs evolve to meet kind of the Victorian era ideal of making death appear beautiful and dignified?
Right.
And things like that. Can you go on that one?
I don't know if I can.
That's okay.
Because I really don't know. More caskets or more metal. So possibly that could have had something to do
Well, it
with
just
it.
seems like at that time they started dressing them up a little bit more. They
Right.
started putting nice
skirts and
skirts
stuff on
and
them
things
that
like
yes use different materials, whether it's velvet or just a crepe material, just to make it more fancy.
pillows,
That we wouldn't use
dressing
before.
people up a little nicer, and then the makeup and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah,
So-
and then placing the flowers on top of the casket, because most of the caskets these days are what we call a half couch. So it's 60-40, the end stays closed. Where most of the time a coffin,
the whole thing.
the whole entire thing comes
Right.
off. Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of funerals, I was looking at the National Funeral Directors Association website, and it said the median cost of a funeral with a viewing and burial in 2023 was $8,300.
So that's
Is that kind of like I assume that's probably
That's
That's
a
the-
baseline. Yeah,
that's a
That would be a
baseline.
baseline. Between 8 and 10 is what I would say. Of course, it could be more depending on what kind of casket you wanted
Right,
to use.
exactly.
That probably did not include your burial space. So wherever you're going to be buried,
right.
especially if it's not a family place, you're going to have to purchase a plot. So yeah, that's pretty.
Yeah, and they said that the median cost of a funeral with cremation is $6,280.
Well, they're saying what? How did they say it again?
They said the cost of a funeral, and this is just kind of general. This is
Correct.
the national median cost of a funeral with a viewing and burial in 2023 was $8,300, while the
Okay.
median cost of a funeral with cremation was $6,280.
So what they're saying right there is they say a funeral with cremation. Cremation can be so many different ways. We can do a direct cremation, which is exactly what that says. The funeral home picks your loved one up, the cremation takes place, and you pick your loved one's cremated remains up, and nothing else is done. What they're saying is probably,
Like a service as well or something?
yeah, you're gonna
yeah.
your loved one is gonna be embalmed. They're gonna be laid out. We're gonna have a full funeral service, and then the cremation takes place afterwards.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
which
now-
is that what we would call a traditional funeral with the cremation to take place afterwards.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, a lot of people are now opting for cremation. I've talked to a lot of people that have said that.
Well, these spaces are getting expensive and hard to come by,
Well-
especially in more urban, higher density cities. That was
Right.
going to be a question I got into you about was, what do you think about now this vertical burial instead of the horizontal where you go 6 feet down? Now they're digging 12 feet down and standing you up now.
I don't know of any place around here that is
Not
doing
around
that
here.
yet.
It's more
Yeah.
like New York and the higher, really higher density, but
Right.
it's
Well,
cheaper.
Yeah, it says I'm just following some of this stuff here. It says of those who prefer cremation for themselves, 44.5% would prefer to have their remains scattered in a sentimental place. 17.2% would prefer to bury or inter them in a cemetery, and 10.6% prefer to have them kept in an urn at home. And 9.6% have not decided.
That is probably my favorite movie of all time.
What?
It's called The Way with Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez. Emilio Estevez wrote and directed it. It's about a Catholic pilgrimage
Yeah.
from France to Spain called the Camino de Santiago, which was on my bucket list to do until my accident. And Emilio Estevez was Martin Sheen's son in the movie too. And he passed on this pilgrimage, and Martin Sheen had to go get the body and decided to cremate it and was putting the ashes on every main point on that pilgrimage. And I love that movie.
Yeah.
That is called The Way.
Okay.
And it is the way of St. John. That St. John is buried.
St. James.
St. James, I'm sorry, thank you. St. James is buried at the Compostelo at the tip of Spain. And it's about this very thing taken, and it's about life.
Yeah, and people do all different things. They will take their loved one and scatter their cremated remains at
Or
different
take them
places.
on a trip.
Take them on a trip. Bury. So the Catholic faith, they have just started allowing cremation.
Yes.
Yes, but
Where you keep the remains
Right.
is key.
the cremated remains have to be buried or entombed. That is
or some sacred space. It can't be kept at a house.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yes.
The only other thing that worries me sometimes with that, and I had a lady ask me about this the other day, is if I go home and I'm on a mantle, what happens if something happens to my family? And I'm just, we've seen it where the goodwill has an urn and there's cremated remains in it. So it's almost, you almost need to know exactly what's going to happen after the fact. I'm not for or not against cremation. My biggest thing is with a cremation, I feel like a family, the deceased deserves a service, some type of service. You're going to hear a lot of just throw me in the back ditch, throw me in the river.
I hear that all the time.
You hear it all the time. And I try to explain it to people that sometimes that service it is for the deceased. It's about the deceased, but it's your family that's there. Your family is going to have coworkers that you haven't seen in years. I had somebody last week that told me all of my childhood friends that grew up on the street came because they knew my dad. Well, they came for
of course
the dad, but they came for the son that they grew up with.
Right.
And he was so happy. And so a service, I feel, is very, very important to have. It's very important.
I've had to put a lot of thought into my service. Being in private sector protective services, I've been shot, stabbed. I've actually been dead 4 minutes and 32 seconds total. But when I caught the diabetes, I went into some diabetic thing and I almost died. And all of my friends didn't care about all my stuff. They just want to know where my recipe book was because I can cook. And so now what I'm going to do is when I pass, there's going to be a funeral thing and everybody gets a taser. And the last person standing gets all my shit.
Stop.
So mine's going to be very simple.
That's stony for you.
Or we can put recipe cards out and each one of your guests can get a recipe.
Yeah, well,
only one person has the secret recipe.
That's
though.
right.
Of course, now that I'm married to Hottie Dr. Miranda, I may have to change my funeral plans a little bit. So
that's fine.
It says nearly 76.2% of funeral homes are family or privately owned. Is that
what is it?
76.2?
Ooh,
seems high.
that seems very high.
well, there's a lot of small towns that have a lot of individually owned, but some of your bigger metropolitan areas, I hear they're owned by what, 2 companies?
There's 2, possibly 3 larger companies that own the majority of big population cities.
So there are 15,703 funeral homes in the United States that employ 106,188 people.
Wow.
And it generates $16.096 billion in the United States.
So there's so many different careers in the funeral industry. You're still going to have an administrator. You're going to have your embalmers. You're going to have the people who are going to do the removals. You're going to have people that work, the hostesses who's going to make the coffee and stuff like that. You're going to have people
I work specifically in media, like so. I do a lot of photography stuff, a lot of visual stuff. But I have worked sound and ran sound for funerals as well as done slideshow presentations, and I've gotten paid for that. So I'm like, I know that I may not be incorporated in some of that, but I know there are people in that industry that, of course, that do that sort of work as well.
So a normal size funeral home could have how many employees? Total employees?
So a smaller funeral home can 4, and they can manage with 4. But then some of your bigger ones, you're going to have 40, 50 employees, especially if they have a cemetery on grounds and a crematory on grounds, because you're going to usually have somebody that's going to be over each one of those things. Yeah.
Right.
And talking about the photography and all that is something that's coming back. So back in the Victorian days, there was a lot of postmortem pictures that were taken. Then it got really the creepy word nobody wanted. That.
Yeah, because you look at some of those photos, they are kind of creepy a little bit.
Yeah. But that is something that is coming back into play. I have people ask all the time, is it okay if I take a picture? I don't care if you take a picture. That usually means
right.
I'm kind of glad of the work that I did.
Right.
But if it's somebody that's just coming in that's a friend, I'm going to have them, ask the family, is it
course.
okay? Be a
course.
little respectful for that. But
more so in my line of work, I have filmed the service as a whole, especially because a lot of times like it's like the pastor is a friend of the family, or they went to the church there, and of course you have people that usually will either read the obituary that's like a part of the family, or so many nice eulogies from people that just have so many beautiful things to say.
And we even have photographers that come in that actually take pictures just of the crowds and stuff like that for especially a big visitation, big funeral service, whether it be a police officer or a young person.
Right.
And the family, even though 90% of those people passed by the immediate family and shook their hands and gave their condolences, they're not going to remember.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
And so they get to go back and they get to see, oh, my high school teacher did come, and they remember some of that. So I love that. Even the videographers, like you said, almost like a wedding, they'll put something beautiful together, and that's a keepsake for the family.
Of course. That's the goal, at least.
Right,
I want
absolutely.
this to be, especially like I said, so many nice people. Again, just from sitting in the booth in the back, so many cool pictures, but also so many, like, you can really tell where like this individual has impacted so many different lives in this room, and it shows by the people that are there or the things that are being said about that person. It's like, even I get choked up. I'm like, I don't even know that person. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's such a lovely thing to say.
Some people are great storytellers, and when
yes.
they tell that, you feel like you have known
100%.
that person.
Or even better yet, again, I've worked kind of hand in hand with a few pastors before, and like the pastor has known that person, and so even that, like the fact that they get to sit down with the family and get like those little behind the curtain stories, and it's just it's also been sometimes a fun thing as much as it is a sad thing for some people. So
that makes a service, and I am a religious person, 100%. I personally don't feel like a funeral is where hellfire and brimstone should be taught.
100%.
It's okay for the scriptures, in my opinion. It's okay for scripture and all that, and hope and faith and love and prayer and all that.
Yes.
But that service is about that person. So having those stories and all that, I think that makes it so much. The
word that that we've used or that I've used with the pastors that I've worked with is a celebration of life. Yeah. It's like this should be what that is, of like this person has lived a good life or most circumstances. And all these people are here to celebrate that life. Have you experienced any strange or unusual things? Uh-oh. In your 15 years in the business?
I have. And it's a little emotional, but it's so, so sweet. So the first child that I ever came in contact with in this profession, we're going to call him Ben. Ben was abused by his parents, and he passed away as the result of that. And when I took Ben into my care, it was, I had a hard time doing my job just because I kept wanting to hold his hand and talk to him and console him, because I just kept thinking, what did this baby go through? And after everything was done, on the way home one night, I looked in my rearview mirror and Ben's face was there. And it freaked me out. And so over probably the next 2 weeks, I would see Ben in the corner of my eye, and it would scare me. And so one night sitting in my bed, I had something in the corner of my eye, and I looked and it scared me, and my husband was like, what in the world just happened? I was like, so I told him the story of what I'm seeing, like, please don't think I'm crazy. Right. And it's really the sweetest thing, because he said, what if Ben needs a safe place? He was like, and he obviously feels safe here. And so I said, Ben, you're safe here. Can you please not scare me anymore? You're okay to be here, but please stop scaring me anymore. And that was the last time that I saw Ben. Wow. So maybe that's what it was. But I have, I do feel.
That's an amazing story.
I do feel their presence, especially when it's a trauma, when it's, there is just
somebody dies suddenly or under trauma.
You feel that tragic.
Yeah.
Weight on you.
I can tell you.
So I want to go. It's a 2-part question, and I love the way you got into the conversation here. You're natural at this. So I'm going to give you both questions, and feel free, answer them how you want.
Okay.
What is the hardest part of your job, and what is the most enjoyable part of your job?
So there's a couple of hard parts of the job. Of course, it's very emotional, very emotional. I've had to, over the years, learn how to separate my emotions, because a family's going to come in. First off, the family is usually, they're mad. They're angry. Nobody wants to come in and sit across the table from me. Nobody wants to do that. So you have to learn that they might be ugly to me, and that's okay. They're not really meaning to be ugly to me.
They're processing their own
They're
stuff.
processing their own things. Usually at the end, if I've done my job right, at the end of that funeral service, at the burial, they're hugging me and saying, thank you so much. That is an enjoyable part
of the process.
Yes,
Right.
I have become part of their family, and they love me for it. They're going to remember me. While I might not exactly remember their names and stuff, they're going to remember me and what I've done for them. Over the years, the children were kind of hard. And it was always when my kids were that certain age. So at that time of Ben's story, my son was the same age as Ben.
Oh,
so
gosh.
that was kind of hard. So right now, my children are older, 13, 15, and 18. So if I get a baby, while it's hard, I can do it a little bit better. But if I got an 18-year-old, that would be a little bit harder for me.
Of course.
My brother's a fireman. So if I got a fireman, that would be a little harder for me. The times that I'm having to be away from my family, serving another family, I've missed many of holidays, many of birthdays. I've had to walk out on my birthday one day.
Oh, no.
Because I had to go, take somebody into my
So
care.
you're on call 24/7, basically?
I have been before, but right now I'm not, thankfully. But I missed 2 years ago. I missed a award ceremony for my son, who was a senior, because the church that the award ceremony was at didn't have good phone reception, and I was on call, and I didn't have a backup, and so I had to miss certain things. So that's really, really hard. My family has suffered for it over the years. Thankfully, they understand.
But it doesn't make it easy, though.
It doesn't make it
Yeah,
easy.
you're right.
It does not. The best part of my job is to be able to give that closure to the family, to have someone who's been in an accident and someone tell them you can't see your loved one anymore, and the restorative art that I do, and they're able to see their loved one, they're able to touch them, they're able to have that closure. They hug me at the end.
Right.
There's nothing like it.
There's bedside manner classes for doctors. It almost seems like you almost have to have that same detachment, bedside manner. Is that part of the mortician school, or are there classes?
No.
Or do you just develop that your own
I
speed
think you
and
just
style?
have to develop it. So like Rachel, the funeral director for, she instantly started crying. And to this day, 15 years later, she still will cry at almost every service. I have before cried at services. I've cried in the arrangement room with a family when they're telling me a story, but I also have to stop, and they're not here to console me. I'm here to help them. So it's okay for the families to see that I am that person, but they're also here for me to do a job for them.
Of course.
So I have to separate that.
You're human, but you
Yes.
someone needs to be
Yes.
the
And the day
foundation
that
here.
I don't have that compassion and that care, and like me have to stop and compose myself, is a day that I need to get out of the business.
You got into it because of that
Correct.
empathy and that compassion and
Correct.
connection with people.
Yeah.
So you got into it for that. So if you lose it, I could see where you just be like, I'm done.
Yeah. There's no point in it.
I got something that's dear to my heart that I think would be interesting
Okay.
to know. I'm looking here. Last year, it said Louisiana House Committee gave its nod Monday to a proposal that would allow pet owners to have the cremated remains of their companions buried with them. So what's the status on that?
So in the state of Louisiana, we have pet cemeteries. Okay. For a cemetery where human remains are, you are not allowed to bury cremated remains of a pet or stuffed. What would we call a pet that we
Like taxidermy, I guess.
taxidermy type thing? You're not allowed to bury that pet. Does it happen? All the time. All the time. As a funeral director, we are not allowed to do that. The cemetery has to know what that person is in that casket. But there are families that sometimes do things that we just don't know about.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's
And I can tell you the cemetery boards, they're going to fight that law all the way, because everything sometimes comes down to money, and they're trying
of course.
to keep, there's a pet cemetery and there's a
Mm-hmm.
human cemetery, and
Don't want to cross.
Well, that's our one of our favorite sayings here on the show is follow the money.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
well. I mean, I have the cremated remains of my last little puppy that's next to my bed, and I have a bifold type deal you can buy with the picture, and then
Right.
the remains are kind of contained behind that, and it's right there next to my bed, so I can see my.
So
I
if
can
you
see
go
my-
before me, you want me to make sure it ends up in your
It-
suit
it-
pocket or something?
I was just curious
just
because
without your funeral director knowing.
Just without my, I'll
I
make
would
sure it
love
gets
for
there,
that.
buddy.
I would love for that to be put into my
Right.
casket
Right.
one day. But
We have
I was-
lots of people that bring in all different kinds of things to place in the casket.
Of
So,
course.
fun things that are stuffed animals or letters, pictures, and stuff like that. I've had someone bring in I don't know if it was a shotgun or a rifle. I don't even know if there's a difference between the two. That tells
right.
me what. And they put that in
Get
the
out.
casket. Soft drinks, Little Debbie's,
No way.
cigarettes, all of that stuff.
Hey.
Well, the Egyptians believed that.
They did.
They had
Yes.
their soldiers, their staff. They killed themselves to take them with them.
Right.
Well, what about the story that you saw? What was it in Scotland, where the guy was being buried, and as he was being lowered, the recording went off, going, "Hey, it's dark in
Stop
here.
it.
Let me out of
Stop
here!"
it.
And everybody could hear it. That was freaking awesome.
It is amazing.
Wow.
And from what I understand, he was a jokester.
Right.
Oh, right.
And so he planned that.
Yes.
And it is, especially in his
Wow.
accent,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, it's brilliant.
it's so funny. If you have not seen it, please go
That's
look it up.
crazy. You talk about scare the life out of somebody,
Yes.
though.
Oh no! Everybody
what?
loved it. There was everybody was laughing and just
Okay.
Because
having a
everybody's
great-
saying, "Yep, that's
him.
him."
Okay.
That's him.
Yep.
That's okay. That's
Yep.
fun.
Hey, think back in the old days before they knew when people died. They
Oh.
tied like ropes.
Well,
to 'em.
so hold on now. See, that's
where
actually
the
one of the
graveyard shift
directions
comes
I
from.
wanted to go. There is something called, help me out here, taphophobia is the fear of being buried alive. Is that how you pronounce
I
that?
don't know.
Okay, then we won't go that way. But it was
Is it agoraphobia?
no, it's something else.
But I mean, who doesn't have that fear?
Well, hold on now.
Oh, that would be
something
that'd be
came of that
horrifying.
in the 17th and 19th centuries. This fear led to an invention called safety coffins,
Okay.
and this was a bell.
Mm-hmm.
You had a rope tied to a bell, and if you woke up, you could actually ring the bell. And I have some documented cases here
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
where
wow.
somebody rang the bell
Oh,
because they
yeah.
were buried alive.
Well, and
I think it's
that's where-
pronounced taphophobia.
Taphophobia. Okay.
I think so.
That's where also the graveyard shift comes from, the term for that,
Oh.
because you would have somebody in the graveyard for if that person rang that bell, they were able to get them out.
oh wow.
Yeah.
So there was actually
What a job to have.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We got to dig him
Can
out.
you imagine, just having your tea and hearing ding, 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 ding?
Oh,
Oh,
there's
man, we
another
got to
one.
go dig
But
somebody.
can
Come
Can
on.
you
Shovel.
imagine waking up and
I couldn't.
No, I think everybody has that fear though.
Yeah, I don't have a phobia of it, but I definitely have a. For me, it's if I can't get my arms, if I can't get my arms around is when like the
That's why they make sure
when the
you're-
fear of the tight spaces kicks
Make sure
in.
you're dead when they put you in the box.
You're right.
Well,
And back
And
then,
if you do come back, then there's something else going on.
Yeah.
one of my favorite authors, Edgar Allan Poe, wrote a whole story about this, the premature death. Mm-hmm. One of his stories was about this fear and stuff. It was insane. If
Right.
you never read that story,
and
read
in
it.
those days, there was people would be comatose, and you would think that they were dead, and embalming, the way we do it today, wasn't done, so they really
Right.
weren't dead.
would
And then
wake
they
up
would
from-
wake up, and thankfully there was somebody at the cemetery to bring them up.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just kind of picture the scene, kind of foggy, and think of like a New Orleans cemetery.
course,
or,
yeah.
and all of a sudden,
Well, at least
ding,
those
ding.
are above ground. I mean, give us
Yeah.
give us some credit there.
Yeah, the majority of those are above ground.
Yeah.
You know.
Man.
I don't usually, like I said, I don't usually have a fear of tight spaces ever, but I've noticed like there's been moments where I've been doing like work underneath something and like my arms get stuck, whatever, and I've had that like the panic kind of sets. And I'm like, okay, I know I have to like, and then like, get myself out of it.
Right.
But like I've watched videos of those guys that will just like inch their way through like caves or whatever. I'm like, there's no way. I would never.
I couldn't do it.
And see, I don't have a problem with tight spaces. I've probably had 30 MRIs and CAT scans since my accident.
Yeah.
I get in trouble because I actually fall asleep in the MRI machine. Yeah,
Dang, okay.
fall right asleep with all that sound and everything else going on. I'm out.
Yeah,
That's fun.
that's rough.
I don't mind that at all.
So have any of your children like voiced the interest in potentially going in your field? Or they go in different directions? Or?
I think they're going to go in different directions now. They have all grown up in the industry
Of course,
with me.
right.
They have worked funeral services. They
Wow.
have did a lot. Of course, they haven't been in the embalming room with me or anything like that.
Yeah.
They've watched me fix hair and everything. But I feel like they have the compassion.
That's cool.
But they
Not
really
yet.
don't want to. Yeah, they want to go their own
My
ways.
my dad was a paramedic for 20 something or almost 30 years, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And there was an opportunity where I had considered going into that field as well. And I was like, I think I could probably do it. But then other opportunities came up and I took those instead. And I followed my dreams in other ways. But my youngest brother is now in that field, and he has his moments where he loves and hates it, but it's the same sort of thing of like I think the reason why he is as good as he is at what he does is because he's able to talk to people like they're humans.
Right.
And I think also have that compassion. He's also a very charismatic and jokey person, like all of us are in the
Right.
family. And so I think that also helps a lot because there's been a lot of cool stories that he's told me and other coworkers of his has told me of like, he does a great job because it's like that human element of it all. And it's not just like
And they see a lot of traumatic things. They
100%.
a lot. Yeah.
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 So interesting.
It's very hard for them.
Wow.
Well,
No more statistics over there, Stat
You know,
Master?
I am. That's all I've been looking at the whole time we've been talking because some of this stuff is pretty interesting. But you had mentioned that more women are now going into this profession. They said the tipping point was in year 2000.
Is it
And
an
the number of
empathy
women exceeded
bedside
the
manner
number
thing?
of men going into the mortuary industry.
I don't know if it's a bedside manner thing. I can tell you this. My mentor is a male. Some of the best embalmers and best funeral directors I know are men. So I don't really know why it changed.
Yeah, it's so funny here. It's 2000. It was 51 to 49%. They say today the number of women entering funeral service programs is more than 2.5 times the number of men, 72.1% to 27.9%.
wow.
And they, of course they give some various, women are caring, empathetic, sympathetic.
Hello.
They were good at multitasking, nurturing people, and women have the tenderness that's required to be in this industry and forming these long-lasting relationships. So, yeah.
Yeah, there definitely is more women that are coming into the industry, but pretty much the majority of my learning and everything has come from men.
Has there been any interesting developments over the course of your 15 years, or any new
Technologies or anything?
new stuff or whatever that's happened over the?
Well, there's always different things.
Of course.
At the National Funeral Directors Convention that I just went to, there's so much jewelry as far as fingerprint jewelry that families sometimes want, where 15 years ago we were just taking fingerprints with ink. Well, now we can do it on an iPad, and it can go straight to the family, and they can order jewelry or do a tattoo or anything like that.
Wow.
So there's lots of other different things, but nothing just completely groundbreaking.
I've recently talked with a few friends of mine because there's a lot of things in the world that everything needs to be made, or there's somebody in this modern world. There is somebody that either has constructed something or made something, whether it be art, graphics, or music, or they're someone is doing a job that is making the world work. And in that discussion that I was having with that group of friends, I was we were talking about a random job. I forgot what it was exactly, but I was it doesn't. now that we've talked about all this, like, it doesn't surprise me that there's a job that has to get done, that someone has to do that. But if you would have asked me 10 minutes ago, like, I wouldn't have known that was a thing. And so, like, you just recently said, like, a convention about that kind of stuff. I'm like, if you would have asked me earlier today that there was what was it called?
National Funeral Directors Association convention.
I would have never known that was probably a thing. But, like, when I think about it now, I'm like, well, of course that there's, like, a place for all you guys to get together and
Right.
figure out what to do
And I
with
was
things.
telling these guys earlier, we had, I want to say it was about 350 vendors that are there. And so when you look at that, you have vendors for vehicles, our hearses, our transport vehicles. You have your casket vendors, you have your urn vendors, you have the vendors who do insurance. So we sell a lot of pre-needs and stuff like that. You have clothing. They still sometimes sell the clothing. You have the jewelry. You have
A formaldehyde guy?
Yes, you have your chemicals, you have your makeups, you had. So I mean, it was just a huge, huge convention of all different kinds of things.
How many you think attended that? Not the vendors, but
I want to say someone said the first night that it opened with the opening ceremonies, there was about 7,000 funeral directors there. Yeah.
And you said there was 15,000 in the country, so that means half of the funeral directors showed up.
Hey.
Goodness gracious!
I'm looking at this as wages for mortician, and the highest group that has the highest average salary are Asians.
Really?
According to this stats, a mortician wage gap by race, and they have Asians. They're almost at 93,000.
Are you mean like in America, or you mean like in like Asian countries? Is that what you
No,
mean?
just in general. So according to our data, Asian morticians have the highest average salary compared to other ethnicities.
Well, the Asians put a lot into their burials and
Into
their
their
funeral.
services,
There's
yes,
a lot
absolutely.
that goes into that. A lot.
And
It's very
typically
elaborate.
It's very elaborate. Their customs are amazing. It's going to be usually a couple of days instead of a traditional Caucasian. A lot of times,
One day.
Just do one day. Let's get it done, get it over with.
Wow.
They're going to put a lot into that service, into their loved one.
Well, I mean, I've seen it change since my daddy died. I remember that funeral was I think it was at least 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Now I've seen more and more. It's the day funeral, your service, and you're done. I mean, it's definitely shortened at time. Now I think a lot of it's probably driven by cost.
I don't believe it's driven by cost though. I believe it's driven by people are just in a hurry.
No, that could be too.
Because
I can see that.
Yeah, I have a sales rep that I'm very close to. His son passed away a couple of years ago, and he's given classes, speeches on this, but he did a visitation the night before, and the amount of people that came through that visitation the night before was just amazing, because half of those people couldn't have come the next day.
Right.
And again, the people are coming for the family.
Right.
And, he talks about how important that was. If he would have been in a hurry and just did everything in that one day, he would have
Probably missed some very beautiful opportunities.
He would have missed some very beautiful opportunities, but also the people that showed up, they would have missed that opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're able, I went to a visitation a couple of weeks ago. I did not know the person. I knew the daughter-in-law. That was it.
Right.
But I went, I paid my respects. I signed the register book and I left. And that right there, that's a big deal. I feel like
a lot of
that's
things
important.
are like that now. Weddings and funerals used to take a week. You had a wedding, it would go on for a week.
Right. We'd have a whole weekend of celebrations and stuff like that.
And then it went to a weekend.
Right.
And then now the funerals are kind of the same thing. In Indonesia, they don't prep the body. They allow the body to decompose in the home. And this goes on for a week or two. And that's part of the thing, is to make it to the end where it smells the most.
Oh, thank you.
Wow.
And it's kind of particular to make sure you make it to that point.
Okay. That's something that people are never going to forget.
No, never going to forget that.
Yeah, I don't know about all that. I don't. I don't think I'd want to.
Everybody's got their own.
Across the world, a lot.
Well,
The sky burials in Tibet. I mean, there's so many different things that people view death
each
in.
culture,
And
yes,
each culture is significantly
I mean,
different.
people who burn. Back you think of the, like the pyre.
pillar,
I mean, it's
early cremation.
yeah.
Right.
yeah.
And, I have to start looking at cremation now because that's probably my last chance for a smoking hot body. So
you keep.
It all,
Miranda,
there's-
that's your husband.
There's
he's made that joke more than once, and he
there's
keeps hoping it'll stay.
always a little joke there.
Of course.
Well, there's always the the little old man that walks in and said, "I bet the people are just dying to see you, dying to
yeah.
get in
Right.
here,"
Of
and you just have
course.
to laugh at them. And yes, and or the pallbearers when you're going to pin their boutonnieres and they want to jump back and
Of
think
course.
that you've nicked them, and
Of course.
yeah,
You're not the first.
not
But
the
hey,
first.
But it's always.
It's usually a daily occurrence. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I get that. Well, this was, I think, a very lovely conversation. I really appreciated this. This was really cool to see. And like I said, to tie back to the conversation I've had before, there's a lot in this industry and in this world that you're talking about that I'm almost sure that I'm not aware of. But
Right.
but hearing you talk about it all now, it makes sense why there is a lot of people.
Right. And
that
that's
that
why
happen.
I think I really started the Talk Like a Mortician, because I want people to be able to ask me questions and me to be real to them.
Of course.
So many people will walk into a funeral home and think that funeral home is out to get their money.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not. We do have overhead expenses just like anybody else. But
and now it's against the law to bury them in your backyard. So you kind of have to go through a funeral home at this point in time, right?
I mean, you're able to, but you have to go through the right procedures and get the right permits and all that stuff. And I want to say, if you do get all the right permits, you're not allowed to sell that land, of course, anymore. It wouldn't bother me to live on a cemetery land.
Once human remains there.
Correct. But yeah, definitely I want to, educate,
Of course.
take some of the, what was the old wives' tale? Oh, you were talking about the hair and the nails still growing, just to cut some of those old wives' tales that people still
So basically what you're saying is the hair and nails don't continue to grow.
continue to grow.
So how does it look like it, go into that? How does it look like the hair grows and the nails continue to
So
grow?
because of the cold of the body, your skin actually decreases it. What is the word?
Constricts.
It kind of constricts and stuff like that. So
Shrinks. It just shrinks. The moisture leaves it and it just kind of...
So if a lady just had her roots redone, it's going to show the rest of the roots. If I shave my legs and walk outside, it's going to look like I haven't shaved my legs at all. So that's where the old wives' tale comes in. It does not continue to grow. I have never seen somebody sit up.
Really?
People say that all the time. I have never met a funeral director, a mortician, an undertaker that has ever had somebody sit up. Most of the time, if you hear that story, it's going to be a maintenance worker that worked in the hospital, and it's usually one of those
Other maintenance workers messing with them?
well, and they're just they like to go back and tell that story, like, oh, I went into the morgue, just kind of be the cool uncle or something.
Of course.
But we've never had
Little
anybody
campfire story.
a campfire story or a fishing tail. My fish was this big. So there's so just to debunk some of those and
That's cool.
just educate.
Well,
Is there anything else you'd like to let our listeners know?
We were talking about pre-planning, the amount of people that kind of do that. So pre-planning, going into a funeral home, there's certain things that I want for my funeral that my family might not realize. So if you're able to do that, that's absolutely amazing. You're able to prepay your funeral. If you go into a funeral home and prepay your funeral today and you don't pass away for another 20 years, nothing changes. That prices you're paying today's prices, where in 20 years, those prices are probably going to increase. So that's really, really good. A lot of people think that their life insurance policy is going to take care of that. And since actually COVID came through, the life insurance policies don't work really well with funeral homes.
Oh, wow. That's good to know.
What they do is they'll say it's going to take us 6 to 10 days, business days, to verify this policy. So a funeral home can't necessarily just take the word of the family. I've had families come in and say, Grandma J put me as the beneficiary. what that person didn't realize is 2 months ago, Cousin Jay came through and needed a fix and changed it, had it changed, and it doesn't go to them. So there's so many other different things. You know, a funeral home has to be paid. We can do a service. We can bury a body, but if we don't get paid, we're not going to go. Like, really, what are we going to do? We can't go
dig them back up.
I mean, we could, but who would want to do that?
Right.
So we do try to, you know, of course, we're going to make sure our funds are there. So there are some insurance companies that are great to work with, but there are some that just give the family the runaround, and that's really, really aggravating.
So this is something people need to research and get educated on.
You really need to call your funeral home, because I had a family yesterday that actually said, my insurance agent, and it wasn't like with State Farm or anything like that, it was one of the knocking on your door insurance agents, said that everything is going to be taken care of instantly with the funeral home. And when we called, they said it's going to be, I want to say that was the time, it was 6 to 10 business days before we can verify anything. And then it's got to go to claims, and then it's got to go to all that. And this family had really expected that was what was going to take care of it.
Wow.
So that's a big thing. But even as far as the pre-planning, you know, Grandma Jay might not want, and I refer to everybody as Jay.
Right.
Everybody's going to be Jay. Grandma Jay doesn't like to talk about her funeral arrangements. So when she passes and you're sitting in front of me and I'm like, what kind of songs do you want?
Yeah.
What do you think she would want as a casket? You don't know. So there's little questions that you can ask, you know, if you're sitting there having a conversation, and say, what's some of your favorite songs? You can write that down, even though you're not going to a funeral home, pull your phone out, get some of that information, and it makes it a little bit easier when that time comes. Yeah.
I've had to jump through some hoops to get some very cherished family photos on that slideshow before. It was not easy, but I was like, you know, I either knew the family or was close to them or whatever, and was like, I can do a little bit extra work, and I'm trying to be accommodating, because I know that not everyone has the technological know-how, so they'll get them to me however they can, and I'll make it happen. But.
And I want to say statistics.
Yeah.
Someone said when you come sit in front of a funeral director for arrangements, there's over 200 questions that we're going to ask you, and if you don't, you know, when we need vital statistics for Mom, who we need to know who her father was, who died when she was 2 years old. We need to know that for the death certificate. We need to know where he was born. You know, there's so many different questions that families just really don't understand. And then it's overwhelming at that point because you've just suffered the death.
Yes.
You're having to plan a funeral, and we're needing all this information. So that's another thing to even just...
So it makes you feel even worse that you don't know this kind of stuff on top of losing the person and now feeling
I should
like
know
I should
my
have
grandparents.
known that.
I should know where my mom was born.
And then it doesn't help that the insurance company's giving you the runaround. And you're like, oh, what is happening?
Yeah. So there's all different kinds of things.
200 questions, huh? Wow.
It's about between 150 and 200 questions, because we're asking, what day would you like the service? Who's going to be your minister? Do you have other people that are going to speak at the service? Who are your pallbearers?
Right.
What kind of flowers did they like? There's so many different questions
Over
that we have.
a couple hundred questions.
And, you know, we have one shot to do a funeral. We have one try.
Yeah.
A wedding, we can redo a wedding if we need to. We can redo a birthday party, anything like that. We have one shot to make this right. So we're meticulous on everything, because we want it perfect. We don't have a do-over.
Wow.
That's a good point. I didn't think about. Wow. Yeah, that's right.
Wow. Man.
Wow. Well, again, thank you so much for coming out and having this conversation with us. Like I said, this was a long time in the making, and I was looking forward to it. For those, is there any? Do you want to send anybody towards your stuff, or do you have any?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You can find me on any social media platform as Talk Like a Mortician. I'm more than willing to answer any of your questions. There's nothing that is too silly or too off the wall, and I will help.
Love that.
And if you ever want to come back here and do another show, maybe a special, like this will be the week after Halloween. If you ever want to do one before Halloween, and kind of some spooky story stuff too. I do have one more question.
Okay.
And I don't know if we can ask this, and if we can't, just say we can't ask this.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff on social media right now about funeral directors finding big clots in people since the shot.
Okay.
Have you found this out?
Yes. Yes. So we have found, so when someone passes away, sometimes their blood does clot. Since the vaccine shot has come out, we have found these, we call it the COVID clot. It is a very long rubber bandy type clot that comes almost in a rubber band color, a very pale color, not like a traditional dark red clot. Very long, kind
like a
of
tapeworm looking thing?
Yes, very venous, where you can see where it's gone through the circulatory system. We can almost, of course, we can't ask a family, has your loved one been vaccinated?
Right.
But we can tell when we start that embalming process from those.
You heard it here on the Retrospect podcast.
Yes, we definitely can tell. And I will say this, a lot of neurologists, a lot of pediatricians are actually now looking into it. They're coming to us and asking us as embalmers, what are we seeing? Do we think this is all? So they're understanding that
something's happening.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Whether it was from the vaccine or whether it was from COVID or
right.
Something did change around that time. Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, sorry to throw that in
No,
there.
you're good.
I wanted to get that question in. I hate
especially if we couldn't answer it. And you go,
We're done.
Yeah, right.
We're done.
Yeah.
But thank you guys so much.
No problem.
Did you have fun?
I
you like
did.
it?
I had a
good.
blast.
This was a good one.
And we're so sorry that you have such a far drive to get home.
I know.
too.
I'm going to have to walk about, I don't even think it's 100 feet.
Okay.
Well, as per usual for you guys trying to reach out to us.
Can I say one more thing,
Sure,
Ian?
go ahead.
Normally you feel good when a police officer lives next door or a fireman or a doctor. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about having the mortician live next door.
Yeah.
You're fine.
Yeah, you're fine. I mean,
Insurance rates go down if there's a fire department a block away. But
Right.
I'm just saying.
All I'm hearing from the end of this episode is you're going to be taken care of. I think you're
That's
gonna be
right.
okay. Yeah, right.
I'm not
with
going
empathy.
anywhere.
Right,
That's
empathy.
right.
At least somebody may cry for me. So.
Like I said before, if you're trying to reach out to us, we have an email address, getoffendedtogether@gmail.com, where you can give those long form answers, but we also have all kinds of social media. Usually you can find us at Retrospect Pod or /Retrospect Pod on all the major platforms. As we've been saying recently, if you are a listener of Pandora, we recently just got on Pandora, so anybody out there who wants to get involved there and we're upset that we weren't on there, we are now, so go ahead.
That's exciting too.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yes,
Love
exciting.
it.
Great news.
Again, another long thing in the making.
We often avoid talking about death, but today's conversation reminds us that it is an essential part of the human experience. As we saw in the unique burial practices across the world, the way we say goodbye reflects what we value most in life. So as you leave this episode, consider, how would you like to be remembered? And how might your choices echo the legacy you hope to leave behind?
Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone. God bless.
Have a great one.
Thank you for hanging out with us today. You're the best. Peace.